I want to turn to it. Thank you very much. Turn to another question. This from Claire Evans.
Does the yobbery of MPs during Prime Minister's questions give the best impression of the political elite?
The yobbery. This was, of course, said by the Speaker, elected by the House of Commons, to speak his mind about them, and that's what he said. They behaved like yobs and upper-class toffs and all sorts of other things, and were giving themselves a bad name. All right. Have you got a bad name?
No, it doesn't give us a good name. I think Prime Minister's questions is... the behaviour there is unprofessional, it's childish, it is at times nasty. I think that we're at work. You know, this is our workplace. Where else? You know, you wouldn't tolerate that behaviour in a classroom, you know, let alone a boardroom of any effective kind of an organisation.
You never shout out, you never
so
go on and confess. Twice.
I have, if not shouted, loudly projected. And about two things I felt strongly about, but I didn't feel good about myself afterwards, because I thought if my constituents had seen me, let alone my mother, you know, my life wouldn't be worth living. So I think Prime Minister's questions needs to change. I think it can change. I think we can change the culture if our party leaders and party whips decide that's what they want to see happening. And I would, this is a personal view, not a party view, I think I would like to see real changes to PMQs. I think if we went back to 2 sessions a week, made one about perhaps a specific topic, so you could have much more in-depth questioning, or you made one more like a kind of select committee session where groups of MPs, small groups in rotation, could question the Prime Minister, you know, having a meaningful discussion rather than, you know, this is our window on the world. And if you, like me, believe in the power of politics and democracy potentially to change the world for good, and this is our window on the world, it is not a good advertisement.
Charles Kennedy, you've been there longer than anybody else on this panel, and you know that 500,000 people in this country watch it, and people in the United States watch it.
Yeah.
For the sort of political excitement of it. Do you think it should change?
The Americans love it, because
Yes.
they've got no equivalent whatsoever. Now, Obama's very fast in his feet, and he could cope with it, but imagine if George Bush had to do Prime Minister's question time. I mean, he would never have got a second term. So, you know, it has its advantages. There was a very distinguished parliamentary commentator of years ago called Norman Shrapnel, and he once wrote, too much silence is much more ominous than too much noise in a parliamentary democracy. Now, I'm not a fan of Prime Minister's questions. I used to have to ask 2 questions once a week for the 7 years or so that I was party leader, getting shouted at by both sides, both colleagues here. Well, perhaps not both colleagues here, but certainly their equivalents in days gone by. I don't think it's a good advert, but it isn't also a typical representation of Parliament at work. And I find, for example, as a consumer, political consumer, I like when the Prime Minister goes a couple of times a year in front of the committee for a couple of hours, chaired by all the select committee chairs. And you get meaningful exchange. You don't get yaboo. So if you want a bit of entertainment, Prime Minister questions, that's your slot.
To entertain.
If you want,
our job isn't to entertain, though, is it?
Well, there's got to be an element of entertainment. There's an element of entertainment about politics. There is an element of showbiz about politics.
Well,
if you're to get through to people.
Simon Cowell, then, if you want to be entertaining.
No, I'm not saying we just want to be entertaining, but sometimes if you want to make a point that gets through to people, wit can be a very lethal weapon in politics.
Do you agree with that? The lady there, the scarf, the blue scarf one, yes.
I think the downside to this is particularly for women. I think that many women are turned off politics.
Yes.
They don't like the adversarial way that they're picked on and spoken to. And although you've been very brave about speaking out, I think shouting out, shouting over men and taking part in that is very bad for women.
Do you
And
think Margaret Thatcher didn't enjoy it then?
Well, I don't think she epitomises all
think she
women in
loved
politics. And that's all I can say.
All right, Jeanette
But I
Winston.
think you're right. If we could get more women into politics, the culture would change quite naturally. It just would. You know the difference. Even in the best situations, you go into a bar room full of guys, it's a very different atmosphere than if there are ladies present or you're in there and it's just women. Of course it is. We don't have enough women in politics. And we need to encourage women to get more involved. And I hope that will happen. The Tories have got no commitment to getting women into politics, but Labour does seem to. You've dropped your all-women shortlists. And I'd like to see women just changing the culture naturally by our presence. Look, even in the judiciary, you know, there are only 18% of women who are QCs. There aren't yet 30% of women in the boardrooms. Women are still underrepresented everywhere in public life. So we need to change that, and then we'll see the world change without having to legislate.
All right. And the man up there on the left, you, sir.
Is part of the problem the...
Oh, I was going to go to the man behind you.
Sorry.
But, we'll start with him and then we'll drop down. Yes. Yes, you go first.
OK. I was going to pick on the point that you say about all women shortlists. I don't think that's the way forward.
No, but you're a man,
females...
so you wouldn't.
No, because there are very, very good women in Parliament already, and they got there on their own merit. And that's the way it should be going forward.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. If you take that argument, you see, here's the problem. If you take that argument, what you're doing, you're making an idiopathic argument where you're saying, well, if women succeed, that means all women can succeed, and the fact that there aren't more women succeeding means that women are just not very good at succeeding. Or you can look at society and say maybe there are social issues here, which is why women are not yet represented properly according to the population statistics in those echelons of power. That's what I'm talking about.
Women very much have the ability, though, to break through those barriers.
Absolutely.
It's only because of all women shortlists. It's only because Labour had all women shortlists that we actually got the big increase in number of women in Parliament. That was the.
But you're all making the assumption that women wouldn't shout, and that it would. Roger Scruton, do you think women wouldn't shout and it would be completely different?
There is the assumption, absolutely, that somehow manners are going to be better. If women are...
No, it's not that, Roger.
Well, let him have his say.
Well, you are... This is what Liz was implying, at least. And, of course, on a panel like this, you're on your best behaviour, and you do seem, you know, to be a very acceptable voice for your sex. I don't know what you're going to be like when in that situation you're confronted with somebody who really opposes you and really hates things that you're saying and thinking. Won't you give your...
If you've knocked on on doors and campaigned, you will find people who tell you exactly what they think about you.
Yes, no,
so
I have done that. Yes, but nevertheless, isn't the problem not the yobbery of the members of Parliament, but the bad judgment of the people who vote for them? You know.
Controversial.
Does it actually matter? I mean, the Speaker goes on about this yobbery and things. It's half an hour once a week. And as everybody else says, that's not what goes on in the House of Commons.
It's the only thing that gets on the television. It's the only thing that gets really on television.
But that's the conundrum.
That's the problem.
That's the conundrum.
Because that's what people see.
That is the conundrum. Of course, there's very worthy work goes on in Parliament. Committees are televised, but people watch PMQs. And the conundrum for us is that we need to engage the public. In a democracy, we need the public to be interested in what's going on in Parliament.
But the public are women as well as men.
Well, hang on, we all believe that it would be great if the public watched our very dignified proceedings in committees, but they're interested in Prime Minister's questions. And Prime Minister's questions is a unique institution pretty much in the world. Most politicians around the world that we talk to are terrified at the prospect of having to face anything like that. It gives a huge amount of accountability to a Prime Minister of any party who has no idea what the question is that he's going to be asked. I absolutely don't agree with Liz's idea about having sessions where it's defined, a certain subject is defined. The whole point about PMQs is that the Prime Minister has to demonstrate that he's across the whole of his brief. He understands all the issues.
And why can't he do it without doing what he does, which is insulting the Leader of the Opposition week after week after week? I mean...
and not being reciprocated.
No, and of course it's reciprocated. No, and vice versa. But you have to remember what Cameron said when he came in. He was fed up, he said, with Punch and Judy politics, the name-calling, backbiting, point-scoring, finger-pointing, and vowed to change the way we behave. And that was December 2005. That's 10 years ago.
And did you...
9 years ago. What's happened? Maybe you should have a word with your leader.
Well, you know, I think we're all captured. I'm sure we all go into the chamber intending to be extremely well behaved on a Wednesday at...
you don't have to be... do you feel forced by peer pressure?
But
That's not good, is it?
The mood of the chamber captures us.
All right.
Even you, Liz. I've seen
you
you
I'm
getting
quiet
excited
in
on the front.
PMQs. It was only in health questions when I got irritated with Jeremy.
Right, the man in spectacles. I want to turn to... Thank you very much. Turn to another question. This from Claire Evans.
Does the yobbery of MPs during Prime Minister's questions give the best impression of the political elite?
The yobbery.
I think that we're at work. You know, this is our workplace. Where else? You know, you wouldn't tolerate that behaviour in a classroom, you know, let alone a boardroom of any effective kind of an organisation.
You never shout out, you never
so
go on and confess. Twice.
I have, if not...
This was, of course, said by the Speaker, elected by the House of Commons, to speak his mind about them, and that's what he said. They behaved like yobs and upper-class toffs and all sorts of other things, and were giving themselves a bad name. All right.
Shouted, loudly projected, and about two things I felt strongly about, but I didn't feel good about myself afterwards, because I thought if my constituents had seen me, let alone my mother, you know, my life wouldn't be worth living. So I think Prime Minister's questions needs to change. I think it can...
Have you got a bad name?
No, it doesn't give us a good name. I think Prime Minister's questions is... the behaviour there is unprofessional, it's childish, it is at times nasty,